Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public in the gallery aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if you hear fire alarm go off, please make your way out of the nearest exit and gather in front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you're seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast and recording. Lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent? Thank you very much. Before we begin the introductions, can I just make everyone aware that there has been a change to the membership of the committee? At the request of the leader of the PIP group, Councillor Warren Gibson, Councillor Savage is now a member of the committee and Councillor Barton Brown is now a substitute member. May I ask the Development Management Committee members who are presently seated in the front row of the chamber, starting on the left, to introduce themselves, just stating your name.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Peter Gregg, I'm Vice Chairman of the committee.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Alan Aylett.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, Councillor John Anderson.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Aylett.
Good evening, everyone. It's Councillor Russ Savage.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
And Councillor Tom Skip.
Thank you very much. And may I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Thank you. Stephen Garner, Assistant Director for Development Services.
Cheryl Salmon, and I'm the Committee Officer.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the committee.
And may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Councillor Michael Fuller, not sitting on the committee this evening.
Councillor Andrew Thornton.
Thank you. Item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any members' interests? Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Chairman. The last item of the meeting is a council application, and I am the Cabinet Member for Housing, but I have and there is no personal interest in the item.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor. Item 3 is minutes. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee held on the 17th of October 2023 agreed? Item 4 is public speakers. On item 1, Mrs Summerfield was going to be speaking in objection. Cheryl, I believe you're going to be reading a statement on her behalf.
Yes, unfortunately, Mrs Summerfield was unable to attend, but I've got a statement to read out for her.
And Councillor Fuller will speak as ward councillor, I'm told. Item 5 is deposited plans. Before we move on to considering the applications this evening, I need to make everyone aware of the following. Items 2 and 3 regarding Benfleet service station were deferred from the meeting on the 3rd of October to obtain further information. As this is a continuation of consideration of those items, only those members of the committee who are present this evening and who were present at the meeting on the 3rd of October are able to take part in this debate and vote on those items. To clarify, the following members were present on the 3rd of October. Councillors Bowker, Aylett, Anderson, Lillis, Mountford, Carol Sage, Savage, Skip and Jackie Thornton. The following members gave apologies on the 3rd of October and will not be able to participate in the debate or vote on those items. That is to say, Councillor Gregg, Councillor Barton Brown and Councillor Aylett. Item 1 is 6 Aylett Close, Canvey Island. I'll now hand over to the Planning Officer, Stephen, to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So the first item on the agenda this evening is for 6 Aylett Close, which is the proposal is for a change of use from the existing residential dwelling into a children's care home for up to 3 children. This application is being presented to the committee this evening following a successful call-in by Councillor Fuller due to concerns about the location and character of the property and proposed development, and the location potentially being inappropriate for the use of the property and having a detrimental impact on adjoining properties. Concern was also raised about the property failing to provide enough amenity for the proposed occupants. So, as I said already, the application is for a change of use of the existing dwelling into a care home. You can see here the site in question. It's a fairly rectangular site and is occupied by a linked detached dwelling. And you've got Aylett Close here, which has 4 properties within it, and then a couple of properties to the front of it facing onto Rainbow Road. More widely, you can see in this shot, this is Aylett Close, and you've got the High Street here along with the Sainsbury's and the Knightswick Centre, just to provide a bit of context of the wider area. So the proposal, this is the dwelling. The proposal would not alter the external appearance of the dwelling, and would provide 3 bedrooms in it, as well as an office / bedroom for staff. So it's a little bit small up on the screen, but you can see at the moment that downstairs you've got living area, kitchen, garage, and 4 bedrooms. The proposal is to keep downstairs the same. This red highlighting is for sort of fire evacuation purposes, if anyone's confused by it. And then bedrooms 1, 2, and 3, along with the home office / staff bedroom here. The purpose of the Children's Care Home is to offer accommodation for children under the care of Essex County Council and neighbouring local authorities. Put simply, these children need somewhere to live, and there would be a maximum of 3 children on site, with 2 members of staff on site at all times that the children are there. As noticed in the report in front of you, there's a national shortage of children's home, and the ministerial statement included and quoted in the report clearly sets out that the planning system should not be a barrier to preventing these much needed homes. The existing use of the property is as a residential dwelling, and whilst policy H2 of the adopted local plan seeks to secure the retention of land allocated for residential purposes, it's considered that the proposed use as a children's care home would supplant this use, and it would still be in a residential use. So there is no conflict with that policy. The site is considered to be appropriately located. It's in close proximity to shops, schools, and other amenities. And as set in the report, it's not considered it would have a detrimental impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring residents. Whilst the garden area is slightly deficient in accordance with the standards set out under RDG 6, this is an existing situation. It's not changing, and a family of the same number of people as this could occupy the property, and there would be nothing we could do about it. And it's not proposed to be made smaller. The site currently provides a garage and forecourt to the front, as you can see here. This provides existing parking for 2 vehicles. The adopted parking standards say that use such as this would require a maximum of 1 parking space per full-time member of staff and 1 visitor space per 3 bedrooms. This would result in the need for 2 parking spaces for staff and 1 for visitors for the number of bedrooms. There would be some crossover of staff during staff changeover times, which are proposed first things in the morning and then later in the evening. Be approximately a 20-minute to half-hour crossover is proposed, which would increase for these short periods of time to the number of staff to 4, 2 times a day. However, on looking at the front of the site, it's considered that there's enough space there to provide 2 additional parking spaces, so that there would be 3 forecourt spaces and a garage space. And the applicant has agreed to provide this, agreed to hard surfaces and provide additional parking prior to use of the property, to provide additional parking. This means that when those spaces would be provided, there would be 4 in total. And approaching this, officers have taken a pragmatic approach that would mean that apart from staff changeover times, there would be 2 visitor spaces in addition to the staff cars parked on site. I also just wanted to draw to your attention that the parking standards refer to it as a maximum, not a minimum, and so therefore it's not the same as if this was just a purely residential property, and there is some more flexibility afforded here. Consequently, for those reasons, officers have found no sustainable reason to object to the proposal, and the recommendation is set out before you in the report and is one of approval. And I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Could I ask now Gerald to read the statement on behalf of Mrs Summerfield in objection?
Thank you, Chair. Stopwatch. Our house is garage linked, stroke attached by one small garage in size from this proposed children's home. The upstairs bedroom windows are a matter of 3 or 4 steps away from each other across the shared flat roof to the front of the house and side. Kitchen windows and our door to the garden face each other 8 feet away. The smell and noise from this proposed home will affect us badly. Having to pass this business every day, whether walking or driving to get in and out, we'll feel this children's home will dominate this close as if we don't live here. We are tightly wedged into the far corner. There is only one way out, so feel hemmed in. The close is very small. Cars parking badly has caused many a near accident and 3 cars damaged because of thoughtlessness of others driving stroke parking where they like in this unadopted road. The blind spot before it turns into rainbow is lethal, with more deliveries every week. Pedestrians at risk too, with vans reversing. I have personally had to jump over on the grass verge that runs along the side. Keeping the road safe and clear, as I have tried for years, is almost impossible. Keeping privacy narrows the close, but there are concerned properties in front of us. We try to keep a happy balance up.
Thank you, Cheryl. Could I ask Councillor Fuller to speak as Ward Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. I speak as the Ward Councillor. Whilst being mindful of the national shortage of children's homes, having examined the application in detail and having visited the site and the surrounding area, I believe that given the location and character of the location, this would represent an inappropriate use of the property and would have a material detrimental effect and impact on the adjoining properties. I also believe that the location of the property would fail to provide sufficient social amenity to the prospective 3 children who would be resident. For these reasons, I have called in this application to the committee so that they can examine in detail the application and the reasons for the recommendation of the planning officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note that this is the member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters that they are unclear of regarding this application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal, and these should be expressed in the debate section of this meeting. Are there any questions? Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. If they're going to concrete over the grass, I use concrete loosely, what are they going to be, what material will they be using? Because the trouble is, so many people are concreting, blocking their drives, and it's causing lots of flooding. Roads are getting, the drains can't cope, there's nowhere for the rain to soak away. I don't know this area. I don't know whether it's prone to flooding. I don't know. But...
Councillor, we have a question there. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, that's a concern that officers share. The condition in question that the applicant has agreed to is set out on page 9 of the agenda, and it's condition 7, and that requires that the hard surfacing that will be put in has to be SUDS compliant, so it's sustainable urban drainage system. So it means that it has to meet the test of permeability, has to in order to avoid surface water flooding and increase runoff. But yes, officers share the concern about surface water runoff.
Councillor Savage.
Mentions children per se, but is there an age restriction or is there any indication of what age groups these children would be?
Yes. So it was indicated that children would be there, and officers have taken children to be young adults, teenagers, up to the age of sort of 18. And so condition 4 has been attached that restricts the number and age of residents to that of up to 3 children who should be no more than 18 years of age. So that's the age bracket of anywhere within there.
Councillor Skip.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. The first one, in the report you referred to a cycle parking at the front of the building. Will that take up any of the parking spaces allocated for car parking? And the second question relates to the two staff working overnight. Will they both be awake, or will one of those be a sleeping shift? I don't really know.
Thank you, Councillor.
So the cycle parking, we've spoken to the applicant, and the location that it was originally proposed at the front of the site would hinder those parking spaces at the front. So we've spoken with them, and I will just find condition 8 is to relocate the cycle parking from where it's shown on the plans to the rear so that it doesn't impact with those new parking spaces. And then with the staff overnight, I'm not sure, there's been no submission about whether they will be awake, whether they'll be asleep. However, I am aware that the office would have a bed in it. So there's the potential that there might be one of them might be sleeping on rota or something.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I'm slightly confused about the ages of the children that will be placed in the home. The opening paragraph refers to 8 to 16-year-olds. Conditions 3 to 4 refer to 18-year-olds. Indeed, you've just mentioned 18-year-olds now. And then on page 6, it states that the children would not be of a driving age. So there's definitely a inconsistency there throughout the report. Either they are of driving age, i.e. 17, 18, or they're not. If you could clarify that for me, please.
Yes. Yes, sorry for the inconsistencies across the report there, and thank you for pointing them out. So the application came in for up to 16-year-olds. However, on looking at it, officers considered that it would be acceptable for up to 18-year-olds as well, who we would still consider would fall within that children's bracket. And so the condition was there so that in the future, if, for instance, there was a 16-year-old who was living in the property and they happened to turn 17, they wouldn't automatically be removed, have to vacate the property. There's that flexibility involved, which would prevent them having to come back to either committee or submit an application to vary the application. But yeah, apologies for the inconsistency.
If I could just come back, Chair, on that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But you say on page 6 that the children will not be of driving age. And I guess that's linked to the requirement of the number of parking spaces.
So the parking standards don't take into account the age of the children, of the occupants of the care home. It's based purely on the number of bedrooms. So on a care home, the standards are the same regardless of the age of the occupants. So it's got 3 bedrooms and 2 members of staff on site at all times. And the only thing that's linked to the number of bedrooms is the visitor parking spaces, which is 1 visitor space. It could feasibly be that if there was a 17-year-old there, they could be learning to drive. They may have a car. However, that would potentially be something down to the management of the facility.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. 2 questions, please. Are there any existing parking restrictions in the vicinity, in the road?
I don't believe there are any parking restrictions in Aylett Close itself. I'm not sure. I will defer to members' knowledge of the local area. I know there are parking restrictions along High Street and along May Avenue and some of these roads. I'm not sure whether they stretch up to include Rainbow Road or Chamberlain Avenue, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, if the committee were mindful to approve this application, Basildon Council puts a condition on similar applications that there is a Essex first nomination rule for the children. Is that possible to have something similar on this? I did notice it said other boroughs as well.
Yes.
So if we could restrict it sort of closer to home, is that possible?
Yes, I've not personally seen that condition myself, and it's certainly a good idea because and I understand why members would potentially be in favour of that. I certainly, on the face of it, don't see any reason why a condition. I'm just trying to. It wouldn't fail the conditions test, so I don't see a reason why a condition like that couldn't be added if members were minded to.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Chairman. The previous question is past, partly asked the question, answered the question I was going to ask. Do we know where these young people currently live? In other words, are they Castle Point, Basildon, Southend, Lee areas? Thank you, Chairman.
So we don't know where the specific children that are proposed to live there live. However, the government sets guidelines on that children should be located as close as practically possible to family, friends, so that they're not sort of kicked out and moved to Scotland or Wales or completely opposite end of the country. So we're not sure who specifically is going to live there. It's been submitted that it would be those who need to be housed by Essex County Council, Children's Services, and then other needs from other local boroughs. So it could be Castle Point, Basildon, Rochford, and then Southend, and then further afield potentially.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes. You're stating that it will be taking children from Essex, but is this actually part of Essex County Council framework?
So I believe the proposal is by a private company who would then be housing occupants from Essex County, placed there by Essex County Council. I'm not sure what arrangement there is between the two. No, I'm not sure.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, just a further clarification, if I may. Condition number 5. On page 1, it referred to 2 members of staff being on site at all times. Indeed, you gave mention of that in your briefing. But condition 5 on page 9 says there shall be a member of staff on site. Just want to make sure that condition is as tight as possible. Thank you.
Yes, apologies for that. I'm happy to amend it. If members are minded to approve it this evening, I'm happy to for it to be approved, and we can amend that condition to say 2 members of staff to resolve that.
Councillor Aylett.
Yeah, with regards to the extra parking they're going to put on the front, is that going to affect bin storage and where they're going to keep their? Obviously, they're going to be bigger bins for the kids' home, I'd presume.
So they would still be able to use a normal residential waste collection because it's a residential use. They've still got the side access to the garden, to the rear, and also the garden, which they would be able to store bins in. I appreciate they may currently be storing bins in the front garden or down the side, but it's not considered that it would impact it if that area is used for parking instead.
Councillor Anderson.
I don't know how the residents are thinking in this area, but they might ask the question, do these youths have a criminal record?
As I said earlier, we don't know the history of these. It's for the general principle of a care home. Those who are placed there, at the moment it's proposed that they're placed there by Essex County Council and potentially other local authorities. We don't know anything about the background of those being placed there.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. The Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have concerns about the location of this children's home or residential place. The reason being that from my experience being on this committee, which isn't as long as possibly some of the other members, there's been numerous times we've been told that there'll only be a small number of young people within that property, but they do attract their mates, seem to find out where they are, and you end up with large gatherings of young people there. And I feel that this particular road and these houses, the close proximity to each other is really too close for some type of care home. Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Savage.
I'm really, really torn with this. And I'll tell you why I'm torn with it. Because my niece is a senior social worker who has taken children from the Essex community as far as Leicester because there isn't places for them in our local community. This model is something that Essex County Council are pushing forward because they want to integrate these children back into what is seen as normal society. That's what this is about. This is about putting them in something that looks like a house, not a home. So I understand the residents' concerns here. I understand the issues with parking. The question I asked regarding the age was because of the statement that Cheryl kindly read out from the resident immediately adjacent who said about smells, because I wondered whether it was going to be babies and, you know, such like. But I'm also concerned, as myself and Councillor Aylett were discussing, about potential of 3 17-year-olds who are driving age rocking up there and another 5 cars being stuck outside of there. So I am really, really torn with this one. But I just wanted to share that information with you really more than anything else.
Yes, Steve, would you let's come back on that?
I just want to come back that on the age point, if it's something that members consider is a concern to them and they are concerned of that, obviously it was originally applied for as up to 16-year-olds. If members wanted to alter the officer's recommendation from 18, because we officers in our professional view didn't see a reason to object to it, if members wanted to amend that condition to 16, that is within your gift.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes, with regard to the 16 to 18, it's a major trauma for a 16-year-old to suddenly be put out on the street to find somewhere else. So I can understand the logic between, if somebody's already there at 16, allowing them to remain to 18 and the need for that. I have concerns. This is needed, this type of facility. But yet again, we haven't got sight of any location assessment within the documentation, and we don't know whether it's already accepted by Essex County Council. So I feel that there's a lack of information that's being provided to us, and for that reason I'm not particularly comfortable with it at this stage.
Would anyone else like to speak? I'll give preference to anyone else before, if no one else wants to speak. Councillor Savage. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, like everybody else, I've got concerns about this. Reading the report, I mean, Essex Police have been invited to comment, and they've obviously got some concerns because they're asking for the applicant to come forward and with the thing about security measures on the building. So do we know if any of that's gone ahead at all?
So the comments by the designing out crime officer specifically referenced whether there's a need for CCTV, secure door locks, and secure windows and things like that. So to me, from the response, it was more about ensuring that the property itself was safe and secure.
I'll allow you to come back, Cross. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going back to Councillor Jackie Thornton's comment, and I do get that. I really do think that we need a little bit more information with respect to the allegiance between the applicant and Essex County Council. I'm wondering whether it would be prudent to suggest a deferral for that information rather than making a rash judgment now, whether or not we could defer it and make a better judgment with that information in place. Just an idea.
Would anyone else like to speak? I'm afraid that someone has already spoken in objection on behalf of residents. That's unfortunately the rules of the chamber. Okay, members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. The motion would stand in the first instance, would it?
Sorry, the chairman's moved the motion, so we need to put that first. If that doesn't succeed, then we'll ask the committee for an alternative recommendation.
So I would just repeat, those for the motion? Those against the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against abstentions.
And I would abstain.
Are there any other abstentions?
Any other abstentions? Councillor Aylett.
Okay. Do you want me to
Right.
explain?
Do you want to? Yeah.
You haven't voted in favour of the proposal, so the committee now needs to give valid and material reasons for a change of recommendation, and then we need a member to propose that from the committee and someone to second it.
So I would ask someone to propose an alternative motion and for that to be seconded.
Yeah, I think the committee would like to go for a deferral and bring it back at a later date with the relevant information that's required.
And you second that, Councillor Salinger? Do you want to make any points here?
So what information specifically is it that members would like to see it come back with?
Councillor Thornton. Councillor Thornton.
Well, would it be possible to have a location assessment as part of the government guidance, and also what the situation is with Essex County Council and whether it's part of their framework?
Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, could we also have a confirmation on the age group for these children, please?
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what Councillor Gregg said earlier on, can we have something with regards to the Essex Police Designing Out Crime Office, the DOCO, if I pronounce that abbreviation correct, that they have no objections and that these meetings have taken place? Thank you.
So we can't require the applicant to have meetings with external third-party bodies. However, we have put them in contact following receipt of the Essex Designing Out Crime Officer. We have put them in contact. They didn't raise an objection as part of their consultation response. It was a list of recommendations for, as I've said to Councillor Gregg's question about CCTV, secure door locks and things like that. So, yeah. So on the points that have raised, with the location assessment, I am happy to ask for it. However, it is not something that I think is something that we could require under planning. However, I'm more than happy to ask for it, and if the applicant is willing to provide it in support of their application, then I'm happy to move forward with that. I'm also more than happy to talk to the applicant and Essex County Council to find out what the situation is with that, whether they're on the framework and quite how it's where they are in the process if they're not, and things like that. And I'm more than happy to confirm on the age group. However, I'll say what I said earlier, that is also within the gift of members to amend the condition how they see fit.
Want me to? So, members, so it's been proposed and seconded that the application is deferred until a future meeting to obtain the further information, which is the location assessment, whether it's part of the Essex County framework, and to confirm the age. Is that all? The police wasn't part of it. So then members, the committee needs to vote whether they're for that recommendation or against.
Okay, the vote is the amended recommendation. Those for the motion.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Item 2 is 179 Kiln Road, Thundersley, which is Cedar Hall Ward. Before I hand over to the planning officer to present this item, I'll just give anyone in the gallery the opportunity to leave should they wish to do so. Thank you. Just as we alluded to earlier on, Councillors Gregg and Aylett were absent at this meeting and sent their apologies, so they will take no part in this meeting, but we have a quorum, so we'll proceed on that basis. Okay, I'm going to now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. So, majority of you who were here at the previous meeting on the 3rd of October will be familiar with this item. I won't be going over what I presented in that meeting, other than to say that this proposal is to extend the operational times of both the petrol filling station and the on-site shop, so that they open at 6 a.m. in the morning, 7 days a week, and close at 11:30 p.m. To match the existing weekday operating times. This means that it will open an hour earlier on a Saturday and 2 hours earlier on a Sunday, and closing an hour and a half later on both days. At the previous committee, the recommendation of approval by officers was put to a vote and the motion was lost. And you'll also remember that I advised members that I did not consider there to be a basis to refuse the application on the detriment to amenity of local residents. A motion was put forward to defer this application in order to obtain additional information from environmental health on the number of noise complaints. The report before you provides this requested information. As you can see, there's been a number of complaints by residents over the years, many of which have been resolved with the garage informally. And in one case, there was formal action taken with a notice being issued, but this was resolved shortly after the notice was issued. In some cases, including recently, no action has been possible because there is either no breach it's been assessed to be no breach occurring, or the complainant has not provided sufficient evidence to investigate or demonstrate harm. Since publishing the agenda, I appreciate time's gone by, period of a week and a half or so. I've spoken to Environmental Health today to get an up-to-date report on it, and they've confirmed that they do have an open case at the moment about noise from the vacuum cleaners that are there on site at the moment, and other complaints about noise emitting from the site. However, they are ongoing, and the complainant, Environmental Health are both working with the applicant, MFG, to resolve these issues. And also, Environmental Health wants me to point out that there's been no actual noise monitoring been able to be undertaken to date. None of the additional information that's been submitted changes the professional opinion of planning officers, which is set out in the report presented to you and at the previous committee meeting. And the recommendation before you remains unchanged, and the application to vary the approved opening hours is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Councillor Thornton.
Yes, on the premise that we've got further applications on the site coming forward in the meeting, this is for the car wash as it exists, is it?
So this is just to vary the opening hours of the shop, the existing car wash, yes, the existing car vacuum and the air and water tower.
So how does that affect the application that's coming afterwards? Would it run over onto that?
So it was confirmed in the previous one that the reason to vary the hours will run because the condition covers the shop as well. So even though the next item proposes to remove the car wash. Sorry, the condition would still apply to the shop. So it would apply if the next application were to be approved and the car wash was to be removed, the varied opening hours condition would still stand and still be applicable to the shop and petrol forecourt.
But what about the
Councillor Thornton, sorry, could I just take in a few more questions? I will come back to you. Councillor Savage.
Can you confirm whether or not the petrol station has got licensing for selling alcohol? Please.
I don't know.
Councillor Thornton.
So will if the future application for the jet wash, car wash, is approved, does that have this variation carried over to it, or does it have to start from scratch and could have different times?
Just bear with me a second. Having two applications on the same site does confuse matters somewhat. But, so I didn't think it did. So the variation of condition on this one, which is to vary the condition that covers both the shop, car wash, car vacuum and air water tower, will only apply to the shop in this instance. It will not apply to the new jet wash bays. On the next item, there is a condition recommended specifically for the operating hours of the proposed new jet wash bays.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. As the member who proposed the deferral motion, I think I should thank you, Steve, for going away and get the information requested. And my question, is it within our gift this evening to further vary these hours of operation so that the local residents don't get a wake-up call at 6 a.m, but there could be a compromise of maybe 7 a.m. on a Sunday? Thank you.
If that was something members wanted to do, they could do so. However, I would say that the noise impact assessment that was submitted and indeed environmental health found no harm with the proposed opening hours of 6 a.m. on a Sunday. So it would be difficult, in my opinion, to justify a condition, and an applicant would have the right to appeal against any condition, even if it's granted approval. And if they were to appeal and it go to appeal, I don't know what the council's justification would be when there's professional advice saying that there's no harm considered to be resulting from the proposal.
Councillor Savage.
Chair, Stephen's been kind enough to answer the question I was going to ask. So.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. You say there's an open case on the carvac that's currently ongoing with environmental health, and this is to vary the timing on the carvac as well, isn't it?
So the case at the moment is because it's to do with the vacuum cleaners causing a lot of noise beyond that which they should do. The latest that I'm aware of is that the MFG, the applicants, Motor Fuel Group, have made some changes to it. I don't know what they've either serviced them or which has reduced the noise, and the complainant is waiting to see whether it makes a long-term benefit. In terms of whether it applies to the actual car wash, so it's at condition 7 is so that of the recommendation splits out the requirements so that the operating times of the car wash, car vac and air water tower don't change from the existing, and that it is only the shop that would be operated between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11:30 p.m.
Councillor Thornton.
Can I also say, with regards to the fact that you said some of the monitoring reports hadn't come back from the past complaints, according to what environmental health have said, I've currently got 3 residents around the borough that are putting in complaints because they can't get the app to work that is for monitoring that. So if the committee could be mindful that that is an ongoing situation, not a planning consideration, but an ongoing consideration.
Are there any more questions? The planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of, but I move the recommendation. Would anyone like to speak? I think we've probably done quite a bit of the speaking as well as the questions. Right. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion.
2, 3.
Those against the motion.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Are there any abstentions? Okay. We need an alternative motion. Would anyone like to suggest? And obviously we need a seconder for an alternative motion. Councillor Savage.
I'm not really sure how we would word this, but in line with other adjacent, I say adjacent, petrol stations and garages in the immediate area, just a look-see at what other times stations are in our borough. Most of them close around 2300. They do start around the 6, 7 o'clock in the morning time, and I just wonder whether or not, again, we could go back and ask the applicant to change those times to bring them in line. But my other concern is about the potential for licensing.
What we're really looking for at the moment is an alternative motion, as the original motion was voted down. We need someone to propose an alternative motion.
Yeah. Well, again, I just wonder whether we could get a deferral then.
Councillor Thornton.
Could we propose that it's against the residential amenity of the neighbouring residents?
As I've previously explained and on the previous meeting, given that there is a noise impact assessment report which has been assessed by Environmental Health's noise consultant, Ed Davis, and they've raised no objection to it because the results of the report state that there's not considered to be an adverse effect on residential amenity and noise. I don't think that it would be a sustainable reason for refusal on that basis when there's evidence to the contrary.
Councillor Thornton.
Is that not sort of in question, given that there is an ongoing open case that wasn't obviously taken into account? I mean, the whole point of deferring it was that we came back and looked at the environmental health things that were going on. So the report that we're basing it on hasn't taken all the information into account.
The same could be said for most applications that come to committee, that they may not have taken into account something that happened the day after that it's happened. I completely understand where you're coming from. However, under environmental health legislation, if there are concerns, as there seem to be at the moment, the applicant has made changes to the vacuum units, and that has apparently they're going to see how that goes. Environmental health have powers under their own legislation to take action. I was also copied into an email that showed that I was aware that there were issues with the noise app for monitoring and recording, but that monitoring and recording was offered at multiple dates throughout November, and those weren't those dates where it was decided to wait and see whether the improvements were sufficient. So my opinion is that it doesn't present even though there's an open complaint at the moment, I don't think it represents a robust reason to object to the proposal.
So again, committee, we need an alternative motion. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to go back to the point. Could we not pursue the deferral, Steve, whereby we would go back to the applicant yet again and ask whether there is some compromise to be had on the hours that they are seeking? some sort of wriggle room.
The issue I have is that there is no material planning evidence to support going back to them, and we've already deferred this item once. If it was something that was a concern, it probably should have been raised as part of the previous deferral, and we could have spoken to the applicant. Obviously, it's not just a matter of timing, but we're 2 months on down the road. The applicant does have the right to appeal on grounds of non-determination. They've been very gracious so far and allowed us to bring this back. But they are within their right to apply for what they want. This is what they've decided they want. And I'll just go back to the point that I've made, that I don't think there's any evidence there to support going back and asking for them to change the hours.
Okay, and I fully respect that, Steve. I watched a rerun, the glutton for punishment that I am, of the previous meeting last night. And I'm just mindful that the applicant or the representative of the applicant did talk in terms of working with the community and neighbourhood and everything else. And who knows, maybe they would be willing to relook at those operating hours, bearing in mind that there are other applications in the pipeline as well, which are coming up shortly. But thank you.
So again, we're looking for an alternative motion. Does anyone have an alternative motion? If there is no alternative motion, then we will return to the original motion, which is the officer recommendation for approval. Those for approval, can I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Those against?
1 against.
And those who wish to abstain?
1, 2, 3. Sorry, can I just clarify? There's 10 members here this evening. And you need to either vote for it, against it, or abstain for it, because my numbers are coming out to 8 each time. So it should all add up to 10. So I just want to.
There are only 9.
Sorry, ignore me. Right, so that's right then. Sorry. Sorry, so it's 4 for approval, 1 against, and 3 abstentions. So yes, it is carried.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 3, dare I say, is also the same premises, Benfleet Service Station, 175 to 179 Kiln Road. Again, just a reminder, obviously the 2 councillors who were not present on the original one were not eligible. I want to hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Much the same as the previous one, this item was deferred from the previous meeting on the 3rd of October. The application was for permission to demolish the existing mechanical car wash at the site and install 6 electric vehicle charging points, parking bays and a canopy along the western side of the site, with jet wash bays towards the northern side of the site and a new tyre pressure machine, electrical substation with enclosure and a plant room for the jet wash. Just to jog everyone's memory, we've got the electric vehicle charging bays along here where the existing mechanical car wash is, proposed jet wash bays, plant room and a new substation here. So as with the previous application, the recommendation to approve the application was voted upon and the motion was lost, and a motion was put forward to defer this application in order to undertake consultations with Essex Fire and Rescue, UK Power Networks and the Health and Safety Executive. The report before you provides those responses. Essex Fire and Rescue have responded raising no objection to the proposal, subject to compliance with building regulations and having an adequate water supply for a sprinkler system. but given this is an existing petrol station, so those are already in situ. The Health and Safety Executive have raised no concern with the application. It's not within one of their consultation zones, and so they've got no concern with it. No response has been received from UK Power Networks. However, this application is to add a substation to the existing network, and it won't be relying on other substations in the area for capacity for charging. In my opinion, I don't think that the lack of a response from UK Power Networks represents reasonable justifications not to take a decision on the application this evening. And then just moving forwards to some additional information that we've been provided for by the applicant is this hazard zone map. These hazard zones come from what is known as the Blue Book. The Blue Book is a document which sets out how petrol station operators should operate their forecourts, how they should be set out, various different policies. I equate it to it's like the planning legislation and planning laws, but for petrol stations. And so this map here shows the hazard zones around the pumps. You've got zone 1, which are these green areas here. These are the part of the hazardous area which a flammable atmosphere is likely to occur in normal operation. So these are the vents here within the petrol station. You've got these blue zones. Each of these blue zones here, they are the part of the petrol station which a flammable atmosphere is only likely to occur for a short period of time, normally during filling, retopping up of the tanks or people filling up their vehicles. And then you've got this purple area here, which is another hazardous zone, which is only applicable when the tanker is filling up the tanks. The guidance within the Blue Book states that the maximum distance from that you should be able to go with a vehicle and still have it plugged in and charging should not overlap with these hazardous zones. So you've got the areas, these circles around, these blue circles here around the charging zones indicate the maximum that you'd potentially be able to stretch one of the charging cables. And then these obviously the hazard zones, and there's a clear gap in between. So with this additional information that's been provided and presented to the committee this evening, I don't consider that there's any reason to alter the recommendation of approval. It remains unchanged from the 3rd of October. I would, however, clarify that for everyone's ease, the combined recommendation from last time, including the amendments that were proposed in the late letter schedule and the additional informative that Essex Fire and Rescue have proposed, have all been put together for everyone's ease on pages 22 to 24 of the agenda this evening, and it's recommended for approval still. I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this particular planning application? Councillor Anderson.
It's all very interesting, these zones being put down on a diagram. The question I'm asking is the distance between the hazard zone for the charging units and the distance between the temporary evacuation of gases from the petrol pump. What is that distance?
Specifically, I don't know the exact figure. However, it's between about 1 metre to 2 metres. That distance, sort of that clear line of gap between there.
Councillor Savage.
Can you confirm, Stephen, if this drawing was done by the applicant or whether it was done by a third-party expert?
It was provided by the applicant. I don't know whether who's drawn it, but it was provided by the applicant.
Are there any other questions? Okay, the planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Anderson.
I think it was pointed out by one of the planning members of the closeness of the petrol pumps to the EV units, and I think that was a very good question, and I just feel that this distance of a metre and a half, I really don't think it's good enough, and I don't think the planning of where the EV units are to the petrol pumps is sufficient. So really, that's my question. My question is, is it sufficient? Is it sufficient? We're looking at this diagram. I don't think it is.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yep, you would like to hear.
So the following the
Yep, you would like to hear.
Following the previous committee, we've investigated more of what the Blue Book says, which is how they are managed, how petrol stations are managed, and with regards to electric vehicle charge points, it says that the charger and vehicle, when charging, at the full extent of the charging cable, must be outside of any hazardous area. This dashed blue line indicates the maximum charge area, and these obviously are the hazardous areas from vapours relating to the petrol station. They do not cross or intersect, and therefore on that basis it's considered that it complies with that legislation, or that those requirements. However, would mention that that's not a material planning consideration, just for information purposes.
Councillor Skip.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, at the previous meeting, we asked for this to be deferred to establish the standards required for this. This diagram, assuming is now the industry standards, I don't see there's anything we can do about that now. It all seems to comply, and therefore I think I'll have to offer my support now for the application for that reason, assuming these are the industry standards and they are complying with that.
Councillor Savage.
I disagree with Councillor Skip for several reasons. The first reason being that I spoke to a member, an expert, a former London Fire Brigade auditor, who is an associate of the Association of Petroleum Explosives Administration, which, if you look at the bottom of the hazardous drawing, refers to the APIA edition 4. Well, basically, we're in edition 5 now, for one. This actually falls not under the remit of Essex County Council or the Essex Fire Service. It actually falls under Essex County Council's trading standards. So we haven't actually gone to them, and there are petroleum inspectors who authorise this kind of drawing. Secondly, when I spoke to the fire chief at London Fire Brigade, the vehicle, as soon as it's plugged into that charger, okay, becomes part of what's called the charging circuit, okay? So that 8.5 metre circle there shifts quite a long way to the right-hand side, and it actually will affect the hazardous zones. And you can't see it on that drawing, but there is a reference there, DSEA. So that stands for Dangerous Substances, Explosive Atmospheres, Regulations 2002. Now, Section 5 in there, identify and classify areas of the workplace where explosive atmospheres may occur and avoid ignition sources from unprotected equipment in those areas. Now, I can't use that adjacent to them petrol pumps, and a battery on a Tesla is about 400 times bigger than that. I'm seriously questioning this, and I'm without being too negative, I want to defer it again, because I want to go back to the petroleum inspectors to look at that drawing to see whether they agree with that. The reason I'm really concerned is because the Blue Book, okay, is actually guidance from an IET, which is the Institute of Engineering and Technology Code of Practice. So if that did go bang, that petrol station, okay, the first thing that would happen is the HSE would rock up there. They'd say to MFG, why didn't you use IET code of practice? Okay, and we have actually going to be sanctioning that. So we're part and parcel to that investigation as well. But I want to come back to one final point, if I may,
If you
Chair.
could, please.
Normal site closure. This application, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is actually for 24-hour vehicle charging. Is that correct? Yeah. So 4.1 of the actual IET Code of Practice states, and I quote, whatever means are adopted to provide an electrical supply to the EVSE, an interlock should be provided so that when the filling station is closed for any reason, the EFSE is disabled. They're not legally allowed to do that for 24 hours a day. Because as soon as that petrol station closes, those charges have got to come off because there's no one there to turn them off in an emergency. So this application is going to fail, in my opinion, on the basis it's not actually meeting 4.1 of the Code of Practice in any case. So I'm trying to help MFG here a little bit by saying if we defer it again, get clarification on my first point and actually ask them to change their application in any case, because that is wrong, in my opinion,
Thank you,
against
Councillor.
the Code of Practice.
I've allowed you to run on a little bit. It was quite interesting what you were actually saying there. Yeah.
I take what you mean about section 4.1. However, it then goes on to talk about, and granted, this isn't planning and this isn't material to the consideration. This is additional information that officers have gone away to get to provide members with more information. So it says where the EVSE is fed from a supply separate to that serving the filling station, consideration should be given to providing an interlock by means of a fibre optic link, and then goes on to talk about supply cables. So it does seem that there are abilities for where it's fed by a different supply for it to be, but obviously I'm no electrical engineering expert, and I would just highlight again that whilst we've gone away and got this information from the Blue Book, it's not something that is a material planning consideration. It's not something that we can require them to do. We can't require them to adhere to these standards because it's not something that we have a policy for, either nationally or locally. And so, I understand where members are coming from and their concern. However, at the moment, I can only put forward the recommendation for approval.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've all sat and listened to what Councillor Savage has said tonight, and we're all pretty much concerned with this application. I can't support it for the reasons that he's given, and I would say that Councillor Savage isn't trying to scare the public, he's trying to protect them, and that really should be the overriding concern of this chamber. So whilst Councillor Savage is unhappy, I will certainly support his deferral request. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
It's very interesting what's been said. Any advice how we can tie this up into a material consideration for deferral?
The reason the application was deferred before was to obtain comments from UK Power Networks, the Health and Safety Executive and the Essex Fire and Rescue Service. I thought that was a reasonable reason for a deferral, to get those bodies' comments on it. We now have those bodies' comments with the exception of UK Power Networks, and I've explained why I don't think that they represent a reason to justify it. Given that I cannot identify any planning grounds that relate specifically to this, I don't know what a sustainable reason to defer it would be. So unfortunately, I'm not able to offer any ideas or pointers on that.
Councillor Savage.
I find it, and I'm sure my colleagues around the table find it equally as frustrating that, you know, when you talk about public safety, our residents and people coming into our borough, in terms of a health and safety element, and I know that necessarily doesn't fit with the planning criteria, and probably not against the government wishes to cover the ground with EV chargers, and I know it's against the sort of the mandate that's being set nationally at the moment. But this puts me in a really uncomfortable position, Steve, and I just cannot put my name to this. It's wrong. You mentioned that you've gone to the HSE, but as I've said earlier, neither the HSE or the fire service are actually authorities that look after this. It's actually Essex County Council Trading Standards, and I only found that out today. So, having spoke to the HSE or sent them a note on the 2nd of November, and they responded to me this morning and told me to go to Essex County Council.
Mr Savage, sorry, could I just let Councillor Thomson speak? Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. If we've established that we can't find a material consideration to go down that route, which I think we're all concerned about, what we haven't discussed yet is the fact that we're extending into the green zone above, and the proximity to the proposed dwellings that are going to be built just above that, and whether there's the amenity to those dwellings is going to be affected, and is there a material consideration there? Because we haven't discussed that at all yet.
So similar to the previous application, a noise impact assessment has been undertaken, and it's come back that it's taken into account because a revised one was produced, because one of the original complaints by the owner of the site to the north was that the original noise impact assessment hadn't taken into account the fact that there were proposed dwellings to be built there. A revised noise assessment was undertaken that took into account those dwellings. It went back to that revised report went back to Environmental Health. They've assessed it, and they've considered that the impact from the proposal on those dwellings, it's not going to harm the residential amenity of those dwellings that have yet to be built, or indeed those that are surrounding or existing.
Councillor Aycock.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked on the UK government website. I was something else I was looking for, but I came across it. There they're saying that 4 electric charging points should be put on a space of 800 square feet. I'm not quite sure what that works out in metres, but it's quite a space between each vehicle. And the other thing is that I've recently, with some of my colleagues, been on to a building site where they had 4 electric vehicles being charged, and between each one of them they had a parking bay blocked off, so there was kind of a parking bay width gap between each vehicle being charged. Now, looking at that, to me it appears that those vehicles would be quite close together. I also found that the Fire Brigades Association, they reckon that an internal combustion engine car, petrol or a diesel, they can extinguish within 5 to 10 minutes of arrival on the site. On these electric cars, they reckon you want a minimum of 45 minutes to extinguish a fire on it, because the battery is underneath the vehicle and it isn't that easy to get access to it. Right, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Aycock. Usually we'd be saying that everyone gets the opportunity to speak once. I think we're into the 3rd or 4th time round for someone. I will take 2 more. Yes, yeah. Councillor Savage.
I'm not trying to be clever here by any means, but I've just Googled basically material reasons for planning declining. So what factors affect planning permission? And depending on local authority, there are several factors councils consider before signing off. two of them on here, I think, fit the bill here. The first one is designs that don't meet required standards. I don't genuinely believe that that meets the required standards of the IET. And also errors with the design and access statement submission, including missing information.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Savage, a search reveals that if a proposed development proposes substantial health and safety concerns, it could be a valid reason for the council to refuse planning permission. Also, it says in the context of local UK development management meeting, decisions to refuse permission based on health and safety grounds align with broader planning principles. Is there not something from that we can pull?
So I'll come back to the points raised by both Councillor Savage and Thornton. So where in the point that Councillor Savage raised about the design to meet a required standard, my understanding of that is it's designed to meet a planning standard, so a design code, a local plan policy, that sort of thing, not a standard that is completely separate, not adopted by this authority, not adopted by or not applicable in this instance in the planning process. Errors in the submitted information. Sorry, you're right. Sorry, Councillor Savage, you're right to just say which bit. I've jotted down errors, but
errors of design and access statement submission, including missing information. So if you look at a peer 4, and I think it's currently edition 5. So I mean, I don't know if that makes any difference. It probably might be just a colour change on a drawing or something, but it's a later edition for a start. So on that point, I would say that again, this is a peer, the Blue Book, the IET standards, DSEER, and all those things. They're not planning information. It's all outside of the planning system. And so I don't feel that that would be a reason to, because we do have the powers to invalidate applications where incorrect information has been submitted, but only where that relates to the planning process. So I don't feel that it relates to the planning process in this instance. With the health and safety concern that's been raised by Councillor Thornton, I take that to mean if we don't have any policies or guidance on this as an authority. If we had a policy and a plan that or supplementary guidance that said we will require them to meet all of the requirements and a technical report to be submitted confirming that, then and they hadn't done that, then yes, I feel that there'd be grounds to refuse it on that basis. But because we don't have any policies as an authority, I don't feel that we've got a leg to stand on in that regard. Members are, of course, I mean, we have to take a vote yet, but members are, of course, welcome to refuse the application. However, my advice is that we would be on very uncertain ground, and that if the applicant were to appeal the application, that my professional opinion is that we would lose it because a refusal would not be on material planning grounds, and that there's the potential for a costs application and award of costs as well.
Councillor Thornton. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Given the concerns that there are in this chamber, very real concerns, can we not defer a second time, Stephen, pending reports from Essex Trading Standards, which Councillor Savage mentioned earlier on, and a second attempt to get a response from UK Power Networks? Thank you.
And could I just say lastly, Councillor Skip.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think, like my fellow members here, I have some grave concerns over this, and especially hearing the information that Councillor Savage has said and Councillor Mrs Thornton. But if the professional planning officer is adamant and confident that there is no planning grounds for refusing this, it puts me in a very difficult position on how I'm going to go with this. So I'm really undecided right now. Sorry.
Thank you. I think we've had a fairly exhaustive and good quality debate. So the planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, or should I say, members, the motion before you For approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. Those against the motion.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Abstentions? One abstention equals 8. Yeah.
So, motion fails, so we need an alternative.
The motion has failed, so we are looking for an alternative motion and a seconder. Councillor Savage.
Could you put your microphone on?
Sorry, I'd like to propose that we defer this for a second time for further information along the lines that Councillor Lilly suggested a short while ago.
That's to say, health and,
So that was to defer for reports from Essex Trading Standards, Essex County Council Trading Standards, sorry, I should say, and a second attempt to get a response from UK Power Network.
and do we have a seconder for that motion?
Chairman,
Sorry.
I just wondered if the statement that was made by the councillor here about the fire authority, should we be getting the fire authority's information as well?
We've already got Essex Fire and Rescue's comments, and they've raised no objection to the proposal.
So it's been proposed and seconded to defer for again to get reports from Essex County Council Trading Standards and a second attempt to get a response from UK Power Network. But before the committee votes, I think the planning officer should have an opportunity to come back.
Yes.
So we can go away and consult with Essex County Council Trading Standards. However, I just want to make it clear that we've already deferred it once. If we go away and get the comments from Trading Standards and whatever they come back, if they come back with no objection, we can't keep going down the road of deferring it and trying to find someone else to consult and just dragging it out, because the applicant will be within their right to appeal. But if members want to, I'll stand by what I said last time about UK Power Networks and what I've said tonight, that I don't think it's material. We can chase them again for a response. But if members would like us to consult Essex County Council Trading Standards, if they are the governing body, as Councillor Savage has said, for this, then we can do so.
Councillor Skip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also like us to have another look at the points raised by Councillor Thornton on safety in pending applications. I know you said that couldn't be included, but I think that is a serious concern and should be looked at more seriously.
We can certainly look at that, whether it forms part of this application or whether it needs to form part of a separate briefing. But I can certainly look at how safety relates to determining planning applications. We did look, following the last deferral, for other examples across the country where safety and electric vehicle charging points were concerned. We didn't come up with anything that was of much use, unfortunately, but we can certainly go away and have another look at how this interacts.
I welcome that, because it seems to me that our policy is not keeping pace with developments. That's the issue I have.
Could I say, it's unusual for the chair to speak, but we've kind of said this several times, that the technology is racing ahead of the legislation. But I'm just going to remind everyone we are where we are now. I think all of the concerns raised are valid concerns, but just a reminder. Yeah, Councillor Savage.
Just as a sort of an end comment from myself, Stephen. I know we're putting you in a position, and I know we're putting the council at risk of an appeal by the applicant, but I genuinely think that this is such a serious issue that we need to get this pinned down. And thank you for what you're doing. If you go to Essex County Council Trading Standards and the petroleum inspector says no, I don't got a problem with that, then I promise you I'll shut up and I won't say anything else. But I just
Yeah.
Just as Cheryl's quite rightly pointed out, I think a few people have said this, when we're talking about health and safety, where we are, where we would like to be, that's not actually going to be part of this motion. That's probably a discussion, that's a policy decision moving forward. Maybe we need to be looking at that as policy. But for part of this motion, this application, we're basically saying that we're looking to defer for all its inherent risks as described, but we're looking to defer to reference reports from Essex Trading Standards and...
UK Power Network.
Would that be correct in terms of the motion? Councillor Lewis.
Just a point of order. Can I second the motion, please?
I think we've already had a second, but you can third it if you want.
Well, I wrote that. Sorry. Unless anyone just said, I had written Councillor Lewis as seconded because he started speaking.
So we need to vote on the... Sorry, my apologies. It's been a long night. Councillor Aylett.
The officer contacts Essex Trading. Could he also mention or inform them that these petrol charging points are only a few metres away from residential properties?
So when we consult them, we will provide them. They'll be able to see the drawings and how they're proposed to be laid out. So they'll be able to see the location in relation to its surroundings.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Did you wish to say something, Councillor Anderson?
Chairman, I think you made a very relevant statement there. Technology is racing ahead of policy.
Legislation.
And that's what's coming up now. And we as planning committee members are very much aware of this. And to be perfectly honest with you, we don't like being put in the position of, you've got to accept this because this is what it is. Thank you.
Shall we go to the vote? Okay, the amended motion is for deferral subject to the conditions as stated. Those for the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I will abstain.
And there's none against.
There are none against.
That makes 8, which is right.
Item 4. And just to reiterate, Councillors Aylett and Gregg are both welcome back into the fold at this point.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Deputy. Item 4 is East Crescent, Canvey Island, and I will now hand over to the Planning Officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So try and keep this one short and sweet because it's a relatively small application. So this application is being presented to the committee this evening as it is an application by the council on its own land and property. This application is a full application, so all aspects of the proposal can be considered. So to provide some context, this is 3 East Crescent. It is a mid-terraced property located on East Crescent. You've got North Avenue here, and sort of like follow it further up here. I think I've got on the next slide. You've got the Gunny Park here, and along the bottom, further down at the bottom of the screen, is Long Road. So the proposal in question seeks to construct a single-storey rear extension, which you can just about see on this location plan, as well as undertake a loft conversion with a rear dormer. So at the moment you can see there is a small original extension to the rear, a kitchen area and living room with 2 bedrooms upstairs and a toilet. The proposal is to put in a rear extension with a bedroom and wet room at ground floor level with level access. At first floor level it's proposed to be 2 bedrooms with a bathroom, and then at second floor level you've got another bedroom. So this is what the proposal would look like from the outside. At the front the roofscape would be remaining unaltered, but to the rear there would be a flat roof dormer along with a rear extension. So the proposal has been carefully considered, and it's not considered that it would have a detrimental impact to neighbouring residents or to future occupants of the dwelling. As such, no objection has been raised to the proposal, and it's therefore recommended for approval by officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this application? Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, on page 38 of your report, you said that any further comments that are received by the estate will be communicated to members in late letter schedule on the night. Just to confirm, there will be no further comments. Is that correct?
Yes, I checked earlier this evening and there's been no further comments.
Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Just a general question around the financing of this. It's a council property. Is the extension being paid for by the tenant or by the council?
Obviously, it's not pertinent to the application itself. However, I know that the property is currently vacant and in need of refurbishment. So this is in order to improve the facilities that are there and provide more accommodation.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Rycott.
Thank you, Chairman. Would I be right in thinking that the council proposed this property to be used with a person with some disabilities, or I'm not quite sure the word you use. Thank you.
Yes, so that's why, if I move to the floor plan, there is a wet room and bedroom on the ground floor, and it's all proposed for easy access. So my understanding is that someone with mobility issues it would be designed to be suitable for that sort of tenant.
Are there any other questions? The planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, dare I say, I move the recommendation. Would anyone like to speak? Thank you, Councillor.
I like it. I think if it does help somebody who's got disabilities, I think we should be doing more and more of this kind of upgrade of properties, and so I fully support it. I think it's a fantastic initiative.
Would anyone else like to speak? Well, if no one else would like to speak, I'd like to say I think this is great, and it's vacant, and we're improving the property, and we're actually improving one of our own assets. So, absolutely. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Unanimous.
That's unanimous. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and a very good evening.